After careers in teaching, law, and nonprofit management, Theresa Shaw's lifelong interest in archaeology has led her to our Center for Near Eastern Archaeology and a passion for ancient coins. After getting her BA in 1964, she served 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer teaching English in Francophone Africa. Then taught high school, French and English for several years. Then she got her Juris Doctor in 1976 and practiced law 23 years, focusing on wills, trusts, and probate. Teaching courses in probate law and civil procedure in paralegal program at Laverne University Law School. During her time as a lawyer, she ran a hobby business with her spouse, selling Southwest Indian art and forming a personal collection. She volunteered with museum support groups for a national historical landmark steam railroad in northern New Mexico, where she served as president, transitioning to the paid CEO of this organization for 8 years. In retirement, she pursued a lifelong interest in archaeology and the ancient Eastern Mediterranean with travels, study of scholarly writings, and courses in ancient Greek. As a valued volunteer working here with us at our Center for Near Eastern Archaeology, she has developed a specialty in numismatics, consulting with faculty and identifying coins, and has contributed as a lecturer in the last 2 CNEA programs. So this afternoon, we're very pleased that Theresa Shaw will conclude our presentations with the title of her lecture, The Adornments of Artemis of the Ephesians, Coins and Sculpture, 650 BC to AD 200. So we look forward, Terry, to your lecture.
Okay. Get my watch out because I don't have as long as some of you did. No, I'm going to do that. All right. I was thinking that this event that happens yearly is aptly named with the word discovery. It's right up my alley because if there's one thing I love to do, it's learn something new. And so today's lecture is an outcome of being curious about a couple of the coins. And so here we go. No, that's not right. That's it. Okay. Artemis of Ephesia has a long history in the area of Ephesus, covering about 1,000 years. And as I started to read and research about the CNEA coins, I saw something that really struck my curiosity. You see 2 coins. They're both Artemis of Ephesia, and they look pretty different. And so what I wondered and what I wanted to find out was, how did that happen? These are the CNEA coins. They come from the Roman period, and they are the coins that were struck by Marcus Aurelius. The interesting thing about them is that they were struck in Neapolis, in the Levant, actually in Palestine, ancient Palestine. Today, Neapolis is the city of Nablus in Israel. So it illustrates that coins featuring Artemis came from all over the place, all over Anatolia and down into the Levant. And so the Artemis on these coins is Artemis of the later period. And they're based on the statues that if you've been to the museum at Ephesus, you have seen. I'm fortunate to have been there several times in my life. And I love seeing those statues when I go and visit. But the one thing that created a mystery in my mind is that there was a different explanation every time about how she looked. So that was another thing I wanted to find out about. And one of the things you find out in going back is that there is a relationship between how Artemis looked and how the gods and goddesses tradition looked. And I have a statue here of, I'm going to use the Phrygian pronunciation and call her Kybele. You notice it's very static, unlike Greek sculpture. So it's static, and she's associated with animals and also protection. And those are two things that the Greeks encountered when they came and colonized along the coast. And in forming their colonies and in forming who they were going to choose as a patron goddess, they melded together the traditions of Kybele and the traditions of their own Artemis, and they made a new entity who they called Artemis. I wish they had called her something different. It would have made things easier. But anyway, so the new goddess took on this quality of being a protector of the city, and a provider of sustenance for the city. And that is the common theme that runs all through the history of Artemis and the Ephesian people. One of the aspects that I want to mention, because it has something to do with why does that statue look like that? And at the core, what we want to do is remember what we're seeing and what the role of the goddess was in the city and how the goddess was worshipped. The goddess was a wooden statue that probably wasn't seen by very many people. What the people of the city saw when processions were going down the street, which in Roman times was every day, they were seeing a replica. And they weren't seeing the goddess as goddess, they were seeing the goddess in costume. And so whenever you see a picture, usually of a statue of Artemis Ephesia, remember that there's a body underneath all of that you don't see, and everything else that you see is some kind of clothing or attachment that has been draped onto that body. This is something I was really excited about finding online. And it's the digital version of the book that reports on the findings that were made at the site of the Artemision, which you've seen a couple of pictures of today. There's not much there anymore, but excavations that went on at an area where it was beneath a layer of one of the temples that had been destroyed, and they were preparing to build a new one. One of the things that happened is that the previous cult statue and all of the ornaments that had been donated to the temple and belonged to the temple were buried underneath the foundation of that new temple. And so this is the example of some of them. They are mostly gold. Some of them are bronze. And I was really struck by them because I'd been looking at pictures of statues of female goddesses that were wearing necklaces made out of things like this. And here are a couple of examples that I found pictures of where you can see the necklaces made out of the beads that look kind of like chili peppers. And the other thing that was part of the costume were gold appliques, both square and round, that were sewn onto a garment and then were part of the clothing that the goddess wore. Now I'm going to talk about what we know and don't know about how the goddess looked in the earlier times of the Ephesus settlement. And interestingly enough, what we know comes from a Roman coin. Comes from a Roman coin that was made to commemorate the defeat of the city of Massalia or Marseille and southern Gaul by the Romans. And in commemoration, the goddess of the city of Massalia was shown on this coin. According to Strabo, the people of the town had kept the statue the same as it was when they had brought her from Ephesus to found this new colony and continued to worship her and had not changed anything. So it's as close as we can get without some other find coming along that tells us what the goddess looked like in 600 BC. To me, it is the Greek iteration of Artemis. That's Artemis in her more Greek phase. And as time went on, it began the appearance of the goddess started to look more Anatolian. A couple of key things that happened in a period which we don't know very much about and don't have sculpture or coins or to help us along in terms of that, is that in 356 BC, a fire destroyed the temple. A deliberately set fire destroyed the temple. So we have a period of time where the people of Ephesus are building a new temple. It took about 100 years, but when they finished, it was huge, and it was one of the 7 wonders of the world. But if you think about how the destruction of the temple and probably the cult statue affected the people and what they wanted to do when they rebuilt, I mean, how they felt about how they wanted the temple to their goddess and how they wanted the projection of their goddess to look when they finished that building. They wanted, obviously, because it was one of the 7 wonders of the world, to project a really large presence and a powerful presence. And it's during this period between that time and the 2nd and 1st centuries BC that a change in the appearance occurs. And we see it in 2 different kinds of coins. One is a kind of coin that's introduced by Pergamon while it was still existed. And they're called Cystophoric coins because of the basket that you see in the upper right corner. These are coins that were a type of coin that was minted all over Pergamon. And in the towns where they were minted, often there was a monogram in the right-hand field that indicated what the town. And so this is one of the first appearances of a different looking Artemis on these coins. These were struck in Ephesus. Another type of coin that was made was a gold stator. Stator is the weight of the coin, and it's also the name of the coin. And on it, you see a very different looking Artemis. And my eye sees both Greek and Anatolian elements. Starting at the top, the crown that she's wearing is a mural crown. It's the city walls. It's a symbol of her role as protectress of the city. And then there is now something that's forming what the technical term is nimbus, but you could call it a halo around her head. She's holding what are called fillets. There are rolls of carded wool, carded but unspun wool, and it's part of an indication of her power as a deity. It's also used in other ways, but I won't go into that. And then there's something in her upper torso. The lower torso is now very confined, and we see the stag and the bee, which appeared on coins also as symbols of the city. These are some examples of a feature of Anatolian dress of deities, and each of these are what I call Anatolian Greek fusion deities. On the far left, it's a statue of Aphrodite from the town of Aphrodisias. We have a Zeus figure that migrated from Macedonia over to Labrandos in Western Anatolia. Zeus Heliopolis, which is really interesting because it has a kind of an Egyptian headdress, but also features this garment that is like an apron, because it's fixed around the waist, and it doesn't go all the way around. It just covers the front, and it contains segments. You can see they're different, but the idea is it's segmented, and in it are representations of important mythological stories, or in the case of Artemis, it's animals and other figures that are personal to her and significant to her. As far as the upper torso is concerned, there's another aspect of Anatolian art history in the adornment of deities, where a bib-like garment in the upper torso, like this that you see, with something. Nothing that I have found so far has been able to explain to me what those lumps are. But there they are, and they appear on statues of certain deities starting in the 4th century BC and continuing on up through the Roman period. And here are some examples of how that particular decoration was incorporated into statues of Artemis Ephesia. Interesting and different. And there was a period of time when how it should look all the time, a sort of canonization of the characteristics hadn't really happened yet. And at least in Ephesus, that happened during the Roman period with those statues that I mentioned that you can see in the museum. one particular thing that I came across that really caught my eye was this Votive Stila. And the reason is, this is a kind of a tentative looking Artemis, but what caught my eye was the upper torso decoration and how, if you look, you can see that it's attached to a piece of cloth that goes around her neck, which says to us, no, her body didn't look like that with all those lumps. That was a piece, that was a garment that she was wearing. And I sure wish I knew what that signified, but as I said, we haven't come across a good explanation yet. Now, in the Roman period, when the city of Ephesus became an administrative center for the Romans, had grown in wealth, carried on a lot of trade, had pilgrims coming to watch the daily processions, and it was really at the height of its popularity, and so was Artemis Ephesia at the height of her popularity. We have some very striking pieces of sculpture, and I've isolated some of the component parts. On the upper left, she is wearing something called a polos, which is an Anatolian type of crown that is worn by female deities. The nimbus, which I spoke of earlier, what started out as just a veil over her head, but now it's become a platform for something amazing, like winged griffins flying out around your head. And then the third thing is the type of crown that she might wear is a type of temple or shrine of some sort. And on this one on the far right is one that is very tall and elaborate. And when you see the image of Artemis on coins and you see this very tall headdress, it's based on that particular statue. Also, instead of necklaces, various necklaces, now they've been collected into a kind of wreath. And here are some examples of the wreaths and where they were positioned on the upper torso. Also, we see on these statues the depiction of the animals that are related to Artemis. And on the sculpture, because marble is so good for this, is you can create it in high relief, and you make these incredible portraits of the companion animals and the associated animals. And I find myself wondering how they did that on exactly on a garment that might have been worn by the replica statue that was being paraded through the streets. And I've got some ideas about that, but I bet it didn't work quite as well as it does in marble. And here are, for the whole statues, of 4 very good examples of how the goddess came to look during the Roman period, and really pretty much until the demise of the city due to famine, earthquakes, and other kinds of disasters. The 2 on the left are the 2 that are on display at Ephesus. The next one over is on display at Naples. And what's noteworthy about it, it's one of a handful of statues where you see a distinction being made between the head, hands, and feet. They're in a different color. than the lighter colored marble, which is the clothing. The head, hands, and feet are dark because they're meant to represent the original cult statue, which had been carefully tended and oiled to keep it from cracking. And over the course of doing that, it turns very dark. The one on the right, I chose because, I hope you can see it well enough, because you can see that there is a garment over the upper torso that stops just above the breasts. And this is from a later period because it's now decorated with the signs of the zodiac, because at some point, a certain level of mysticism and a certain level of can't find the word, but interest in the zodiac and being able to tell future and fortunes and things like that came on the scene. The big question is always, what are those protuberances and are they breasts? Which is the subject of a lot of controversy. And I've read as much as I can find, but there isn't anything that really tells us. It's all speculation. And as you look at picture after picture after picture of the statues in different places, they're depicted in different ways. But the ones that look the most like breasts are the ones in Ephesus during the Roman period. And I think it's maybe just grandiosity going somewhere, I'm not sure. I think that it relates to a people wanting to have as an important goddess as their protector, and to be as great and grand as possible so as to keep them safe. But of course, there came the time when they couldn't, because an earthquake is going to happen. An epidemic is going to happen, and Christianity happened too. So that's where we stand, and that's what I've learned so far. Yeah. I will stop there.